This build, the Gemling Minionaire, boasts 2 minion builds in a single character without having to swap gems or anything. It is a single button press to get a mapping setup and another button press for you for a bossing setup. Super easy, barely an inconvenience, and a lot of fun. I think this is a great template as well for even more exploration by others. There's a path of building available, a written mobilitics guide, and of course timestamps. I recently created my first build ever for either PoE 1 or PoE 2, and overall the reception was pretty good. A few smaller mistakes, but no fatal flaws or massive oversights, which encourages me to continue on the build making path. I'm taking my time for these. I don't really feel like I need to prove anything. I'm not really known for builds, of course, so yeah, I just want to bring out these guides and show you what I've been thinking about and how I'm building these characters. I think it's worth sharing. My philosophy here is just to make fun builds, explore interesting ideas, and not necessarily do 50 million DPS or something like that. Based on your previous comments and questions, I started experimenting more with minions, and ultimately I landed on the Gemling Minionaire. It does require a few uniques plus twink gear. I'm an SSF player, this is achievable I think. Be aware this isn't a league starter, not even close, because of those prerequisites. Every footage you see is all tier 15, 6 mod corrupted waystones. I'm not always showing those mods. I think clean footage is kind of nice, but I'm not boasting any kind of DPS here, and there's nothing to gain from baiting anyone. Now that you have some idea about the build in general, let's look at the pros and cons, starting with the pros. 1. You get the best of both worlds with basically 2 builds in one, without having to swap gems or anything else. Just press a button for your mapping or bossing setup. 2. Visual clarity, as skeletal snipers don't use screen-wide fire attacks compared to arsonists or raging spirits. 3. Scaling a minion build is easy and straightforward. 4. A summoner playstyle allows you to focus on the boss mechanics, loot gear, and just enjoy the scenery that Path of Exile 2 offers while your minions are doing the work. 5. The voice lines of the Gemling Legionnaire are a lot more bearable than those of the Witch, which is definitely a pro. This guy has a fun personality, while the Witch is just annoying in my opinion. 6. This extensive guide is a pro with a path of building for the twink leveling, the initial swap for early mapping and endgame, with loadouts for every stage of the build and the mobilitics written guide. Some neutral points. 1. Minion AI isn't great, but Skeletal Sniper's AI is a lot better than the Arsonists. I don't know why exactly, I think because they have much more range, but it's a lot less clunky. 2. Defenses are okay, it's not great, but you're not a glass cannon either. And then some cons. 1. You need 2 uniques and 2 good scepters for the weapon swap technology. 2. You can't level a Gemling Legionnaire with minions unless you use a bunch of twink gear, which is exactly what I did. And 3. The build is still quite slow. The minions clear well, but you are moving fairly slow. There's little movement speed on the tree, and I'm not really a fan of using movement skills so far. Plus, we're not using a shield, so I can't even shield charge. Let's talk about the various skills and support gems used in the endgame, starting with our main skills. I'm only covering the endgame skill set that I'm using. First, we have 2 sets of skeletal snipers, both on a 6 link. Snipers deal physical damage, which we're increasing by breaking armor. We'll get to that. Snipers also reduce their spirit reservation based on quality of the gem, and as the Gemling Legionnaire, not only can we use support gems twice in our skills, we also get 14% gem quality from our Ascendancy, bringing the snipers to 34% quality, which translates to 17% reservation reduction. That's a very significant reduction on your spirit. As I said, we're using a setup for mapping and for bossing. For mapping, which we will start with, you'll want multiple projectiles for clear speed, meaning you take scattershot. I'm using Pierce as well, adding to that clear speed, Martial Tempo to offset the negatives of scattershot, Feeding Frenzy for more damage, and it doesn't matter that much minions take increased damage as they mostly kill stuff quickly anyway, and lastly Brutality for another 35% more damage. It doesn't matter that the minions don't deal any other damage types as you're not using the gas arrow ability of the snipers. While mapping, I'm using Grim Feast, but only while mapping, not while bossing. This basically doubles your energy shield, it's quite powerful. For both both mapping and bossing. I'm using the same Pain Offering setup, supported by Font of Rage, providing more attack speed, Ablation for 30% more damage, Persistence so you don't have to cast it all the time, Inspiration because this is a very costly skill otherwise, and Expanse for extra AoE so the buff has a longer reach on our army. We have a Skeletal Cleric setup also for both mapping and bossing, supported by Ingenuity, making it cast more often, Minion Mastery for minion levels, just increasing its overall stats, Meat Shield so it hopefully stays alive, and Arcane Tempo, increasing the cast speed. The Cleric heals minions and revives them, making it a very useful ally in your army. I just have one of them, by the way. For bossing, we are using some other skills, starting with a different 6-linked sniper setup. You do not need extra projectiles or pierce, so we're taking away Scattershot and pierce, and we're replacing them with heft and minion mastery, so their single target damage is a lot higher. The rest is the same as the mapping setup, so brutality, feeding frenzy, and martial tempo. For mapping, I don't care about breaking armor, but for bossing, and that includes map bosses, I do care. The way this build breaks armor is by using Raging Spirits, so let's see how that works. By casting Flame Wall, we summon Raging Spirits. Flame Wall is supported by Arcane Surge for mana regeneration, Arcane Tempo for cast speed, mobility so you don't slow down as much when casting, which is very important on boss fights, and Fortress so it spawns in a circle. Flame Wall itself doesn't really do any damage. The added fire damage on projectiles passing the wall doesn't matter, I think, because our snipers can only do physical damage anyway. This is just a tool to summon Raging Spirits and to inflict Ignite, and that's it. Then we have a look at the Raging Spirits. We're using them to break armor, and you might think that's a little weird, but it works. Raging Spirits are supported by Envenom, making them poison on hit 50% of the time. And they hit a lot, so that's a lot of poisons. Corrosion support breaks armor equal to 80% of the poison damage, which adds up quickly. Demolisher breaks 40% more armor, and finally Splinter breaks armor equal to 15% of physical damage dealt. While Raging Spirits mostly deal fire damage, I think 30% of their damage is actually physical damage, so that should break at least a little bit more armor. Usually, within a few seconds, my Raging Spirits break the boss's armor, and I've seen it break up to 30,000 armor. In a matter of seconds, it's really quite powerful and it works very well. The final minion that we summon for bossing is a Skeletal Storm Mage to apply big shocks. Overcharge provides a 75% increased magnitude of shock, making the shocks 35%, so that's 35% more damage if I'm not mistaken. Conduction gives more shock chance. Coursing Currents shocks also nearby enemies, although on most bosses that doesn't apply. And Stormfire makes the shocks not expire on burning enemies, and because of the Flame Wall which ignites, plus the Raging Spirits which can ignite, shocks hardly ever fall off once applied by the Storm Mage. If you have a Rattling Scepter, which summons a Skeletal Warrior, you can support that guy with Blind, Culling Strike, Maim and Last Gasp. I have 2 Rattling Scepters, one for each weapon set, and both warriors use the same support gems. Now that you know which skills I'm using, let's talk about the weapon swap technique, which enables you to swap armies with a single button. What you must do is set your mapping snipers and Grim Feast to weapon set 1, and you set your bossing snipers, Flame Wall, Raging Spirits and Storm Mage to weapon set 2, and all other abilities like Pain Offering and Skeletal Cleric to both weapon sets. You can do this in the skill overview. In that same skill overview, as we're wearing 2 one-handed unique maces, you have a skill called Mace Strike. It just makes you melee with a mace. You can use it even when there's no enemy around, and depending on which Mace Strike you use, you swap to a weapon set. All skills that are connected to that weapon set, including minion armies, are then summoned and are usable. So by using 2 different Mace Strikes, which I bound to E and Q, I can swap my entire army with a single button. At the start, setting this up can be a little bit annoying, and once you get new weapons or more or less spirit or a gem upgrade or your attributes don't check out or many of the other things that can happen, you are likely to have to redo the setup. It's annoying, but it is worth it in the end. I'm saying this because it might just take you a little bit of time to actually get everything figured out here. Then it's time for the progression of the build, using all the loadouts in Path of Building. I made 3, as this is an endgame guide. There's a twink leveling loadout, including all the unique gear I used throughout pretty much the entire campaign. There's a swap that you'll be making around early mapping for more optimized pathing in the passive tree to get a bunch of sapphires in there. And then there is the endgame loadout. In my case, I reached level 93. For Ascendancies, first you take Crystalline Potential because you're making your way to Implanted Gems, which is +1 level to all skills. For minions, this is massive and minion levels are incredibly strong. Then you take Integrated Efficiency, although you don't use the extra slots. And finally, Gem Studded, allowing you to use 2 copies of the same support gem in different skills. Only after you have this 4th Ascendancy, you can do the army swapping, as they are using the same support gems a lot. You could, in theory, I guess, try it before this, but I really wouldn't recommend it. You're gonna get a super scuffed setup. In terms of the passive tree, the twink leveling gets you towards minion nodes ASAP, although that definitely takes a little while. There aren't any close by. Early on, I would take Relentless and Battle Hardened because the attributes and stats are quite nice, and the rest is quite straightforward. When swapping, you get the opportunity to add a lot of sapphires, which provides significant power to the build. Also, attributes at this point shouldn't be an issue anymore. The path of building fully takes strength, but of course you can take whatever attribute you need and you will need mostly intelligence. I'm taking mind over matter because you're not spending much mana while mapping at all, so mind over matter is a nice additional defensive layer. In the endgame version, I'm mainly taking a bunch more armor and energy shield nodes. I know right now armor isn't great, but I wanted to fit the style of the Legionnaire and not go Chaos Inoculation again. There's a great spot for a time-lost sapphire, increasing small passive nodes, in my case by 28%, making all these nodes provide more minion damage, energy shield and armor. I'm also going for calibration here, because life, energy shield and mana are all added to our effective health, plus I can take another jewel slot. It's a level 93 tree, so there's a bit of room still to grow if you even manage to gain more levels. For items in general, you're looking for plus levels for your minions because every stat they have scales with that. Scepters, amulets and helmets have that. You're looking for spirit as it allows you to summon more minions, multiplying your damage. That's also found on scepters, amulets and on body armors. I went hybrid armor and energy shield gear to stick to the Legionnaire theme, or at least what I wanted that to be, and the rest really is just attributes and resistances. One special mention goes to the only unique in the build, the Trench Timber. This gives you +3 minion levels, is completely insane, and it also gives you the mace strike that we're using. Looking at the twink leveling, you see a bunch of uniques. Some are amazing, some others are very meh. You do need something to help you level, however, and I played minions with this from the start. It works well, but only with this gear. Don't try to level minions without having access to minion nodes in the passive tree for the first 2 acts. It's not a great idea unless you have this type of gear on you. For the early mapping swap, there are no more uniques except the Trench Timber. All of this gear is quite mid-gear, I would say, but it gives you an indication of what I used to wear. And then the endgame loadout, those items are actually quite good, especially for Solo Self-Found, I think, which I'm playing. My minions are all level 33 with this, so it's fairly smooth sailing. A special mention here to the jewels. We're using 7 in the final build, all sapphire jewels, and these provide great power, as you can see. Max energy shield, minion resistances, minion damage, minion attack speed, the list goes on. I found a corrupted blood immunity implicit on one of them, or well, I corrupted it and that's what showed up, which is pretty huge for something like the Trial of Chaos. You can find attributes, resistances, so corrupt those jewels the moment you don't use them anymore, or when you feel like gambling, I guess. Minion stats. Let's talk about minion stats for a bit. In short, minions scale greatly with levels. Their health, base damage and accuracy all increase by gaining a level. The minions in this build are relatively squishy because I don't cap their resistances and they take 20% increased damage from Feeding Frenzy. I found they really don't die much, however, in events like Breach or Ritual in high tier maps, but if you feel they die too much, just swap some of the minion crit nodes towards minion resistances and health. The playstyle is quite straightforward. In the mapping setup, you just cast Pain Offering. It seems since patch 0.1.1c, You don't even need to aim anymore, you can just click it and it sacrifices a random minion, sometimes even off screen. I think that has to do with the controller update that they did, but it's great quality of life. Although I guess the downside of a random minion being sacrificed is that you can't target your warriors. Maybe that's a bug, maybe it gets fixed, who knows. It also makes it a one-button build while mapping, because all you do is cast Pain Offering, you don't do anything else. For bossing, you're also casting Pain Offering, but you are making sure you cast Flame Wall too, as you want to summon Raging Spirits to break the boss's armor. And that's it. For the swap, you just press whatever button you bound the Mace Strike to. In my case, when I reach a map boss, I press E, or I cast Flame Wall I guess, and then my bossing setup spawns. When I'm back to mapping, I press Q. It's super simple. And of course, you use Mace Strike to swap armies. This part of the guide is called Deliberations because these are the things I thought about and tried, but ultimately I didn't like. Doesn't mean you can't put it in though or try it out yourself, but you know, here we go. The first thing I tried, so number 1, is that I tried to break armor using the gas cloud instead of Raging Spirits. And it works, I just found it a bit more clunky having to cast Gas Cloud and that sort of thing. And you have to have 1 skeletal sniper or maybe 3 to have a setup where they have poison damage and then break armor and whatnot. You basically put the gems, the support gems that you have on the Raging Spirits on that army, but it reserves a bunch of spirits. You need like 2 or 3 of them to consistently apply gas clouds, and ultimately I thought, yeah, just this isn't worth it. I'm doing enough damage as it is. 2. I tried using Eye of Winter to increase crit vulnerability or whatever it's called. I think the skill is too clunky, however, it doesn't fit the build at all, and it's another button to press during bosses, which are all bad things to me. So, after a bit of testing, I decided bosses die fast enough as it is. I don't need to cast this, although it is technically more damage. 3. I tried different minions when bossing, most notably Arsonists. The main issue is that Arsonists synergize much more with fire and elemental scaling and not with physical damage, so I would have to make a lot of changes to make that work. A different Raging Spirits setup, probably requiring a 6-link, a flammability curse, maybe weapon swap passives, that sort of thing. I thought about it, tried a bit of testing in-game, theory crafted a bit, but decided against it to keep the build simple and clean. And 4. Weapon set passive points. You might think you're weapon swapping already to summon the other minion army, why not allocate specific points for that army? I tried this, it seems like a good idea, right? But because you're likely swapping also a bunch of attributes around to get all the nodes, it gets incredibly messy with all the skills and their attribute requirements. If you swap and you lack attributes, your entire army will not show up. It was very frustrating to deal with. I wouldn't want to do that to you guys, and more than that, I really didn't see that many opportunities that would significantly increase the bossing damage or my health, for example. At level 93 you basically pick all the good nodes anyway. Minion nodes are generally good for the most part, so again I decided against it and I just have 1 simple passive tree without weapon setup passives. I'll share my loot filter specifically made for the build. Have a good look though at what it shows, however, which really isn't much. Like all my filters, it's pretty strict. And of course guys, use it at your own risk, as always. I've made 2 Regex Strings, which I'll put in the description for you to use. It stands for Regular Expression and is basically a string you can copy into the search bar in Path of Exile 2. 1 Regex String is for waystones. It highlights all the waystones that I don't want to run, which are the ones with minus max resistances, burning ground and less recovery. A second Regex is there for tablets, highlighting quantity of items, pack size and additional breaches. This is my endgame Gemling Minionaire guide. There will be a written Mobalytics guide as well, with changes in the changelog, so bookmark the guide over there if you want. I hope you had a good time watching this video. Let me know what you think. Also, let me know if you have any suggestions. Subscribe and like for more PoE SSF content. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. Love you all. See you soon. Bye bye.